talk, if you go in the world of mental health or or therapists, they talk about uh, eliminate the word should from your vocabulary,
Hmm.
because that is not the healthy way of looking at the world. And you said something about looking at the market, looking at the world, and not the way it should be, but the way it is. You see people talking about that is the isness of the world, is the isness of the people in the world, right? So, and you're learning these lessons, like you said, trial by fire.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing for everybody that's watching, because that is, at least has been my experience, whether it's in business or your personal life, that the world is the way you choose to see it,
Hmm.
right? There's no objectivity at all.
Yeah.
Even our two eyes don't see the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The image in our brain is a correlation,
Hmm.
right, of what this eye sees and the other eye sees, and then it's the combination of the two. So two people can only hope to come to some level of agreement, but not complete overlap of understanding. So this is wonderful. So that led you to then pivot again.
Yep.
So what exactly does Source do today, in more of like, how does what you do today affect or will affect
Yeah.
the lives of everyday people day to day?
Yeah.
So I think a good way to frame this is if we look at the world today, the biggest industries that are growing. So if we look at electrification of vehicles, right? That's a very strong growing industry. Aviation, they have goals over the next 15 to 20 years to drastically reduce the weight of these vehicles to make them fuel efficient. If they're lighter, that means you can go further with fuel. So pretty much materials today, a lot of companies have reached a limit as to what these materials can do for society, right? We need stronger, lighter, cheaper materials. And we also need it to be secure from a supply chain perspective.
Hmm.
We've learned a lot from COVID on supply chain resiliency. So when we look at materials today, right, let's just look at vehicles. We need materials that are stronger, lighter, so that these electric vehicles can actually go the range they need to go, right?
Yeah.
Range anxiety is so prevalent in a lot of people that purchase electric vehicles. So what has happened as of recently is a lot of manufacturers are looking into this world of nanomaterials,
Hmm.
right? This is like the big buzzword. So AI is the big buzzword right now in software. Nanomaterials is a big buzzword in the material science field. And essentially, what a nanomaterial is it's typically something that is extremely, extremely small, right? We're talking, 5,000, 10,000 times smaller than a human hair. But the wonder of nanomaterials is you can add just a little bit of it to, let's say, like a cement or a
Yeah.
plastic or whatever other material. You can just add a little bit and you can boost the strength of that part immensely.
Hmm.
Amongst other things, you can make it more flame retardant. You can make it dissipate heat better for like a battery enclosure, right? So manufacturers are looking at the world of nanomaterials to augment the current materials they have today. The problem with this, like Derek mentioned, is the go-to nanomaterial is something called graphene. This is something made from carbon, right? So think of like charcoal. So you take carbon and you cut it up into very, very tiny pieces, and you get something called graphene or something else called carbon nanotubes. Very high strength material. And this is what the world sees as like, oh, we can make space elevators out of
Hmm.
this stuff. That's how strong it is. It's the strongest material, lightest material on Earth. The issue with graphene and carbon nanotubes is, for one, they're very expensive, right? Like they can be $600,000 per ton, right? Which, for reference, carbon by itself or coal is like 100 times cheaper than that.
Yeah.
So it's quite expensive. But then the big issue with nanomaterials is they don't actually like to mix and play very well in the materials that we want to put them into. So almost think of it like oil and water.
Mhm.
They don't mix together. That's the same thing with a lot of nanomaterial. They really don't like to mix that well. And that's incredibly important in terms of how well that nanomaterial can strengthen. If it doesn't mix well, it's pretty much useless.
Yeah.
So what we set out to do as a company, because we had experience with these nanomaterials and research, we set out to make a lower cost nanomaterial that still has very high strength and is compatible. It can mix with all these different materials like plastic composites like fiberglass or carbon fiber. So what we do as a business is we convert biomass like seaweed or even hemp. So this is a lot of materials that are excess biomass that they're not really being used for many things today. And we developed a process where we can take that biomass and extract out this material called cellulose. And then we reduce that cellulose to a size 10,000 times smaller than a human hair, something called nanocellulose. But what's interesting about nanocellulose is it's 8 times stronger than steel, but lighter than carbon fiber, which is one of the lightest materials on the market. So you have something that's high strength, very low weight. And what we do with that nanocellulose is we sell it to manufacturers so that they can put that into their materials, like, for example, carbon fiber reinforced plastics. So very strong, lightweight material. They mix it in there and they can boost the strength of that final material. We've seen by 30 to 60%, but our material only makes up 0.2% of the final weight. So what we're enabling for these manufacturers is they can actually meet the goals of making their parts stronger, making their parts lighter. Because what ends up happening is if they add our nanomaterial into their production process, they can make the part stronger, which means they don't need as much material to get the same strength as before. So if we're still thinking in the scope of, let's say, electric vehicles, now you can make the battery enclosure lighter, which means you can make that vehicle go farther.
Yeah.
Or let's say in a windmill, right? Wind turbines, you can make it lighter. That means you can generate more power because it's lighter, so you can generate more
Yeah, you
energy.
can spin faster. So, just like in the next 5 years, what we see our innovation really kind of doing for society and industry is exactly what Mason said. I mean, we're making electrification of vehicles possible, or more possible, I should say. Um, you're making maritime shipping. I mean, in the marine industry, I mean, fiberglass is the number one used component to make boat hulls. So, I mean, you think about trying to ship goods all across the world. Fuel efficiency is the number one game there. So if you can just increase fuel efficiency by 1 to 2 to 3%, that's billions of dollars of saved goods when you're transporting these materials all across the world. Um, so we really we really feel that definitely within the next 5 years, we see ourselves being able to incorporate these materials into these really high end manufacturers that then trickles down to the end consumer, and the end consumer reaps the benefits of, oh, now I have a Tesla that instead of going 400 miles can go 800 miles. So now on one charge, I'm competing against a traditional gas vehicle now, and it may make the adoption larger. Same thing in the maritime or shipping industry. Okay, if we can increase the efficiency of a shipping vessel by, again, 2 to 3%, you're saving billions of dollars in logistics costs. So it's just a kind of how it's a trickle down effect of how starting so high in the supply chain can have such a massive impact across multiple different market sectors.
And when we think of impact as well on that point, what's interesting about the seaweed part, right? That's kind of the main one that we use, the feedstock we use. We primarily use seaweed called sargassum. So a lot of people in Florida have heard of this issue of sargassum showing up on beaches, hotel chains are trying to get rid of this stuff.
Hmm.
And we actually work with procurement companies where they're getting paid to get the sargassum off the beach from hotels and governments, to give it to us so we can make this material. So you also have a large impact in terms of you're working with a supply that is a problem for society. And we're removing that, make a high value material out of it, which I think is the key thing, because a lot of companies can sometimes struggle trying to use biomass to make something when they try to make a low value commodity good.
Yeah.
It's a low value biomass into a high value material and chemical.
Yeah. And Rafael, you mentioned earlier about how did we pivot into the world of firefighting and fire retardant materials. So at one point we realized, okay, we could sell just this nanomaterial such as nanocellulose, but then we thought, well, what if you mixed other stuff into it? What if you used it as like a carrier vehicle or a kind of a material that can utilize other particles and get them onto surfaces? And that's kind of one of the aha moments that we had, where we were able to mix traditional ceramic particles into our seaweed juice and then apply those to textiles, and it made the textiles fire retardant without having to use any halogenated or brominated compounds, which are, for the more layman's terms, toxic chemicals you put on clothing so you don't
Mhm.
catch on fire. And I mean, that goes down the laundry list. I mean, right now we're looking at, of course, fire retardant applications. But then, as you mentioned earlier, in the world of textiles, one of the most ubiquitously used things is something called DWR, which is dry water repellent.
Mhm.
So if you've ever worn a Gore-Tex or an Arc'teryx jacket or anything like that, I mean, they're using water repellents because you don't, of course, don't want to get wet. And those are made of polyfluorinated carbon or compounds, so PFAS, which is kind of the big buzzword a lot of people know. And these are the quote unquote forever chemicals that even today, where there's studies are starting to come out where micro and nanoplastics and even some of these small polymers are starting to pass through the blood brain membrane, which is now you're starting to see plastic in human brains. You're starting to see plastic in fetuses of women that haven't even, the child hasn't even been born yet. And the woman is passing on these harmful chemicals to them without ever even knowing, just by coming in contact with certain surfaces that they don't realize. One of the things that you learn, I guess, in the world of material engineering is everything is coding. Whether you have a T-shirt, it's coated. This wooden panel is coated. The fabric, the walls, everything has some sort of coating on it to allow it to perform. And we've kind of turned a blind eye to that over the past 50, 60 years. And it hasn't. Now, of course, science has started to catch up to us, and we're starting to realize, oh, those things that we were spraying on all these materials are starting to have adverse effects on a variety of health aspects. And now we're in that window where the research is coming out, and we're starting to learn about it. And there's a doctor where she actually published a whole research paper about male infertility. So one of the largest things is males are actually becoming more sterile due to some of the underwear that they're wearing or some of
Mhm.
the things that they're consuming. And that's a pretty terrifying fact. If you go out 50, 60, another 100 years, I mean, we may not end from a nuclear war. We may end by just sterilizing ourselves via the chemicals that we come in contact on a daily basis, which is kind of a terrifying thing to think about.
The interesting thing about that, and I know we've talked about this, is there's two ways to look at the problem. I mean, for me, is it's a win-win-win no matter how you spin it. But we live in a world where at least the powers that be are only looking at eternal growth,
Hmm.
right? I was having a conversation a few weeks back with someone. The corporate world is behaves like a cancer.
Yeah.
What else in nature expects to grow quarter to quarter forever? I mean, so if you're a company and Wall Street is expecting you to grow quarter to quarter forever, eventually that means you're going to take over all your competitors
Yep.
globally,
Hmm.
right? And then there's nobody else. And then what? Well, you start, going to other galaxies. I mean, like, how do you do this, right? So there's that pressure, right? But what you're doing has an immense value from an environmental consciousness point of view,
Yeah.
of being conscious about the environment. You're using algae, an
Hmm.
algae that is actually not liked,
Hmm.
Hmm.
that humans want to get rid of because it causes problems for their business, right? And if you wanted to grow that, you probably could grow it too, right?
Yeah.
You can
We
have
work
algae farms.
we work with farmers as well. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So no matter how you spin it, you're reducing cost, you're removing toxic chemicals for things that we wear and use every day. It seems to be that you found a sweet spot on the pricing there,
Hmm.
right? But you still have to be careful because depending on who you talk to, if you come with the angle of we're trying to save the world, you lose certain members of the audience
Yep.
immediately. But if you don't say that, then you lose the other side
Exactly.
of the audience, and that must be a challenge for you.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And the word sustainability is different for every individual and it's different for every single company. That's one thing we realize. I mean, you go to one business unit in an organization, sustainability to them is water reduction. Then you go to that same company to a different business unit, and sustainability for them is, oh, we use less plastics, or we're able to reduce the amount of material we have to produce and make the same amount of money.
Mhm.
So there's no hard definition on what sustainability is for somebody. And again, it's different for every single organization, almost every single person, depending on how they define it.
Very interesting. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I didn't get to cover all the things that I wanted to cover. but I think this has been very, very interesting. Where are you going next?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, I mean, we're in that process that every startup trying to build a crazy business is going through, which is growth.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we went from having a team of just Derek and I and our co-founders to now we have a team of I think around 11 people
Yep.
now, ranging from all different facets from material engineers, chemical engineers, computer engineers, sales. Now we're at the point where we are starting to grow into the next space. Now we're hitting capacity in our current lab. We have two labs in Lake Nona in the Guidewell building. And like pretty much on a daily basis, we're trying to see how we can push the limits of production, produce more. Because a lot of the clients that we work with now we're shipping larger and larger
Yeah.
batches. So we're at the stage where it's like, okay, like we have to level up here in order to service the clients that we're having. So pretty much what's next is we're planning on launching a new facility. Fingers crossed later this year. We'll be increasing our production capacity from around 100 kgs a year to 1 ton, so 1,000 kgs, and that will allow us to work with the different customers along the supply chain. And we work with customers across the aerospace industry. We're working with the automotive company now, so really going into high value technical markets.
Hmm.
And now we're at the point where we're growing the team, so we're bringing more smart people part of the program to really build what we're trying to build, which is the first global production facility for nanocellulose, and that's our mission as a company is being one of the largest producers of nanocellulose into very high grade technical markets.
Yeah. And in the future, I think this is a really cool, just kind of full cycle story. Whether you believe in evolution or not, I mean, the idea is we come from the ocean, we came from the ocean onto land, and then developed how we developed. And I think it's kind of funny that in the near future, we're utilizing seaweed, and seaweed will be in space. I think for our applications, we're working with a couple companies right now where if they integrate our material, it makes their components lighter, and you're going to see seaweed nanomaterials on satellites, seaweed nanomaterials on rockets, and even seaweed nanomaterials on things that land on the moon. And I think that's going to be a really exciting future that we can all kind of strive for. And another thing that I think is coming down the pipeline, and this is more of just a, I guess, a personal opinion or something that we have to look at quite critically, is the world of AI is coming down and it's coming very quickly. And the world of robotics is growing quite fast. I mean, there's a couple companies that we know and work with where they're developing. I mean, if you've seen Iron Man, they're building Jarvis. Like we, within the next 5 years, we'll be able to walk into our home and say, "Hey, Jarvis, I need you to make the chicken for me and turn on the TV and warm up the car because it's cold outside." And I think, and to your point, Raphael, of like, how do we start to shift not only the corporate business world, but also the social aspect of it? How do we treat and look at society? I do think there's going to come a day quite in the near future where we have to really look at ourselves kind of with a really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, how are we going to change the system that we have today? Because these overall technical advancements are happening at such a rapid pace and so quickly that I don't know if society is ready for that such a fast shift. It is a pivot that is coming and it's coming fast. This is just what we're seeing in the material science space. I mean, we're talking to companies that what would take them to formulate a new cosmetic or a new, this is a very trivial example, but a new cosmetic which would take them almost 6 to 9 months to do, they're able to do in 3 days, 4 days with artificial intelligence. Now you've cut out time, you've cut out the people that do those jobs, and there is going to come a day where a billion dollar, a multi-billion dollar company is 8 to 10 people and software, and that's going to be a really interesting time period because we're going to have to learn how to redistribute the wealth that is generated from that. And I think that's going to be a very interesting time period.
Well, it's we already see some of that, right now, and it's interesting when you have companies, young companies like like yours, um, and you enter conversations with people about the environment and how we need to save the earth.
Mhm.
And I smile, not in a negative way, but I tell them, the earth's going to be fine.
Yeah,
We're the ones that are going to
Earth will
not
gone.
be here.
Yeah, we'll be gone.
Yeah, the Earth is going to be fine, and we just need to figure out how to really become better global citizens,
Yeah.
and get smarter, and like you said, redistribute, so that it's for the benefit of all. So it is encouraging to see the work that you guys are doing with such a small team, and the fact that you're so young. You could be my kids. My daughter is turning 26 this year, so.
You probably have some classes with her.
Yeah, so no, it's very, very interesting what you guys are doing. Where do you think people will see your product first in everyday households?
Ooh.
If you're a big golfer,
Yes.
you'll
Well,
see.
not
Not
right now,
now.
not right
Yeah.
now, but yes.
One of the areas we're focusing very hard in right now is in the sports equipment space. So
Hmm.
think of golf clubs, surfboards, paddle boards, board sports, snowboarding, skis. That is a very direct area. So we're working with a couple companies in that space, which is quite exciting. We're really pumped about. And I think on some of the larger areas will be in the automotive sectors and aerospace sectors in the next 5 to 10 years. But I would say first is definitely going to be more of your sporting based equipment. Um,
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, I mean, that's a market that we really hold true and near to our heart because, I mean, we also played sports when we
yeah.
were much younger. And it's just such a cool area to see how consumer products, and specifically sports equipment, how innovative they can really be. And I think that just gives them a competitive edge as well. If they're introducing this nanomaterial golf club, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just sounds cool. But also, I think it's cool for us to see this with our background in material science to see something that is actually going into the world and being used. And I think what's most exciting is nanomaterials is this space that hasn't really reached the masses for many years, and it just feels like we're really at that inflection point where the technology exists today to actually do it. And I think we've developed a process to make it more feasible. So I think we're just most excited to see nanomaterials actually go into the world because we read about materials like nylon and Kevlar back in school. And we
Yeah.
thought, wow, like the people that put that together, it's insane and they're part of history.
Mm.
So it's just interesting because we don't know if the time we're in right now, if we're successful 5, 10 years from now, we may be able to look back and say, yeah, our team, we were one of the people that were able to make nanomaterials on a mass
Yeah.
global scale that people work with
And
every day in their everyday production process. And I think that's what really excites us a lot.
yeah, and I think bringing back or reinvigorating the manufacturing and the ideology of like build things again. I think in the early days, uh, the U.S. was built on risk takers. I mean, you talk to anybody and they're willing to take a risk to build something. And I think over the past maybe 30, 40 years, that got lost kind of in the weeds of development and to your point of maximize profits at all costs. That I think we're kind of seeing a shift now in the American concept of, okay, we need to be able to build things. I mean, if we can't build things, then it's going to make it very difficult for us to be a global player in the future. And I mean, today you're seeing manufacturing such as advanced semiconductor manufacturing being built here in the Orlando area and Arizona. I think the time period is now. I would say there's the ideology of building an advanced nanomaterial company in the U.S. is very possible, and there's also a big incentive right now to establish American manufacturing or securing the supply chain for the future to come.
Derek Mason, it's incredible what you guys have done. Um, I'm sure your parents are very proud.
I would hope
Thank
so.
you. Thank you
They
for
weren't in the
being here.
beginning, but yeah,
Yeah, well, but you've done. I'm honored that I was here when you guys got started here at Lead
yeah,
to see what you guys were doing and all the experiments that were going on over there in the back.
yeah,
Um, thank you for being here. I hope we can do this again sometime.
yeah. Thank you for
Of course,
having us.
thanks for having us. We like the work that you do. I think it's very important to
Yeah.
shed a light on the small innovations and the cracks and crevices in Orlando and just everywhere. I think
Yeah.
very important.